Okay, we're gonna get started. So welcome to What's the Buzz? Impacting Food Insecurity. Earlier this year, addressing food insecurity and hunger was named Omega Phi Alpha's President's Project. So we thought it would be a great way to kick off our new virtual video series. My name is Madelyn Spain. I'm from the Alpha Zeta chapter. I'm the marketing manager for OPA, and I'll be moderating this evening's discussion. Feel free to leave questions in the comments and we'll get to them at the end for the panelists to answer. But with that being said, let's get started. This year, an estimated 54 million people in the United States face food insecurity. As you'll hear from our active and alumni sisters shortly, the good news is there are many organizations working to reduce hunger across the nation. Further, there are ways that service-minded individuals can get involved through volunteer service. So I'm just going to have everyone introduce themselves, tell them a little bit about their role, and share how they found their passion for reducing food insecurity. If you want to go ahead first, Kaitlyn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kaitlyn Wiley. I am a volunteer and research colleague at the Vanderbilt School of Medicine's Shade Tree Clinic. I actually found my passion for food insecurity in organic chemistry. My professor often talked about how food can be used as medicine, which was really interesting because I'm interested in being a primary care physician. And we went from that to food insecurity and how impactful it is as a social determinant of health. I was in the Epsilon chapter my first 2 years of college, and now I'm an alumni member in the Omega Delta chapter.
All right, and Molly?
I'm Molly Speckman. I'm a development officer, so I do fundraising at Northern Illinois Food Bank. It's one of 200 food banks in the Feeding America National Network. So we cover 13 counties in Northern Illinois and helped provide over 80 million meals last year. So I was just first drawn to it after college. I went to the University of Kansas, which is the Alpha Kappa chapter. And that really exposed me to what service means in your everyday life. And something about food insecurity, I think, that's so important is that you really don't know who's food insecure just by looking at them. So it's an issue that can affect everybody in our community.
Awesome. And Jessica?
Hi, I'm Jessica Cooney. I also went to the University of Kansas with Molly. I currently work at Just Food of Douglas County, which is the food bank of Lawrence, Kansas, where the University of Kansas is. We're a small organization. We are a staff of 8. I'm the client services manager. So I handle our pantry program, any of our partners, which is both the campus covered at KU, as well as Heartland Community Health Center, which is a low-income community health clinic that we run a pantry out of. I found my passion for food insecurity when I was younger. I wanted to be a chef. I almost went to culinary school out of high school, but instead kind of stumbled my way to University of Kansas, where I was a community health major. And I've always had a passion for food, and then seeing the intersection of food in people's lives and just how important it is to literally every single day. Everyone has to eat. That is kind of where I fell in line.
Awesome. And Paige?
Hi, my name is Paige Swanson, and I'm a senior at NC State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's the Alpha Lambda chapter. Currently, I'm the Vice President of Outreach for a new nonprofit called the Student Basic Needs Coalition, which is an organization that focuses on training student leaders to advocate for basic needs like food, housing, health, and safety in particular. So we basically try to create change at the campus, state, and federal level so that students don't have to worry about where the next meal is coming from. I would say that I found my passion from this through my own experiences and the experiences of my friends. Throughout college, I've worked to pay for my own bills and everything. And I met a lot of other students who had some of the same experiences and were also worried about how they were going to pay for everything each month. And just seeing how many students were affected by these issues really made me want to become more committed to creating change on campus so that other students wouldn't have to worry about that later on.
That's super awesome. So how did your experience in Omega Phi Alpha prepare you for a service-oriented role? Anyone can answer.
I think that the camaraderie that you build in a community service sorority like this one just shows you what collective impact can do. I think that a lot of the work that we all do is trying to organize the community around an issue. And so when it comes to even just learning how you get the chapter energized about a project that's coming up, all of those skills can totally transfer into the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, Molly, I totally agree. What is kind of cool is during my time in Omega Phi Alpha, we actually did a service project with the organization that I work for now. So we were in Just Food does cooking classes. Currently, during the pandemic, they haven't been happening, obviously. But when I believe I was either sophomore or junior in Omega Phi Alpha, we did a project with those cooking classes. And I had heard of the organization before, but it really gave me an even deeper understanding of what they do, which eventually led into my current position, which is really awesome.
Throughout college, I feel like OPA has definitely helped me to become a better leader. I've had so many leadership opportunities through the organization since I was a freshman, and being on one of my pledge class, being one of their service chairs. So that was definitely a good experience throughout. And I would say I learned a lot of good skills that helped me to become a leader that was able to start new organizations. And also to get a good sense of what different volunteer roles look like, which helps us to be able to look for volunteers as well.
Through OPA, I learned lots of leadership and volunteering skills, what it means to be a volunteer and what it also means to have volunteers work for you. This was really helpful not only for Shade Trees project, but for other projects I've been on. For Shade Trees specifically, we use community partners like the ones that the ladies work at. So it's important that I know how to communicate with those community partners to get what we need to make our project done.
That's really great. So what advice would you give someone who wants to pursue a career in addressing food insecurity? Maybe they're like you, Paige, and just starting out in Omega Phi Alpha, or what?
I would say my biggest advice is to learn as much about it as you possibly can and learn from people who have experienced these issues. And also make sure you put those people's voices at the forefront of your work, because it definitely has the biggest impact when you're able to share stories from people's personal experiences.
I can say that nonprofit world is often hard to break into. Like, for example, Lawrence is a fairly small community where I am. You know, the university is really makes up a bulk of the population. And like I said, I'm a staff of 8. So one of my biggest advice to people is always like, if there's an organization that you're really interested in, start volunteering with them. We have had 2 hires now that have been volunteers, that when positions opened up, they moved into those positions. I also was in AmeriCorps for a year, which is a really wonderful experience. They connect with all sorts of nonprofits all over the nation for different sectors, not specifically just food insecurity, but you know, if the nonprofit world is something that you are looking to get into, both of those are the biggest advice I can offer.
I'd really second what Jessica says. We've had lots of AmeriCorps Vistas join us at our organization all across the different departments. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get experience in fundraising or managing programs or working directly with like food agencies and pantries. So that's definitely a valuable program. And yeah, connecting with those local resources. They've been plugged into the community for so long that there's a wealth of knowledge there that you can get into. And once they know you a little bit more, then they can take a chance on you and maybe you'll have an opportunity to join.
So when writing up these questions, answers, I said to manifest what brings you joy. Finding, like Jessica said, finding a position in the nonprofit sector is incredibly hard, and it's even more hard to find volunteer positions. Luckily, I had stumbled upon this position 2 years prior when signing up for just an email chat with the clinic, and they emailed out for volunteers, and I was like, that would be amazing. That's what I'm absolutely passionate about. I feel like coming from a small community, it can be really hard to find volunteer opportunities. So just go out there and make it your own and be creative.
That's really great. Do you have any advice on how to get out there and find these roles and stuff?
I can say that often your local United Way has a comprehensive list of organizations, and then from there, like checking out their individual websites, seeing what volunteer needs they have, and finding something that fits for you. But I would say for most communities, some sort of list that will exist of all the nonprofits in different sectors.
If you're interested in volunteering at a food bank in the Feeding America network, you can find your own local food bank at feedingamerica.org. So that's a great resource to find which one's nearest to you and look at their opportunities. A lot of food banks do food sorting and packing as one of the primary jobs that they have there for volunteers, but you'll often find a range of opportunities, whether it's a skills-based position or helping out at a special event, or maybe helping with the distribution of food to neighbors. So definitely lots of opportunities there.
Definitely. I agree with both of these ladies. I actually started just looking into health disparities. I noticed in my university community that there was a lot of health disparities, and then I started to work at the ER and noticed that a lot of chronic conditions are due to this. So I started volunteering with remote area medical clinic, and through that I found the Shade Tree Clinic, and furthermore found my food insecurity project.
And then if you don't see a position listed that you're interested in, you can always just email people and ask if there's anything you can help with. It never hurts to ask, and that's how I got a lot of my experiences that I've had throughout college.
That's really great. So getting to a more specific questions based on your organizations that you work in, what client base do your organizations serve predominantly, and how has the pandemic affected the number of people served by your organization?
So the overwhelming majority of the people that we serve are working families who have a job but can't always make ends meet. So it's being able to help provide food to kind of be that stopgap so that it's one less burden, one less choice that they have to make, and that they can spend their time and their energy on other things that can really help their situation. So we definitely have seen a lot of people who are reaching out for help, especially for the first time, which is a really difficult decision for people to get to often. So it's really important for our staff and our volunteers to come from a place of compassion when we're working with all of our neighbors who are looking for help. So because of the concerns with the pandemic, we've had to shift our operations, do more of a drive-through model, and the majority of our pantries have been able to stay open and serve more folks. And we know that some of them are seeing double and triple numbers. And it's something that's going to affect people for a while to come. So it's something that we're all bracing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. My organization, one of the statistics that we like to use to kind of demonstrate the people that we serve is 60% of our client base use us 3 times a year or less. So it really is an emergency resource of something that, there's always medical issues, a car accident, something that increases your bills, like those instances in life that we're not prepared for is what a lot of organizations are there for as those emergency resources. The first week of the pandemic, though, I will say our client numbers went up 49%. So almost half of the people that were using us that week had never used us before. Like I said, Lawrence is a college town. There's a huge hospitality industry here. There's also a big music scene, and those people were left with nothing at the start of this. So we obviously serve everyone. We don't turn anyone away. We know that income isn't only the defining factor in food insecurity, because of those instances that come up. And so yeah, that's kind of, things have definitely changed and gotten busier, but we've been able to adapt and stay open, which is all that we can do.
As of March, my clinic served a predominantly Hispanic population. Again, like the ladies have mentioned, our population is actually people who are just common folks working and trying to get by. With the pandemic, unfortunately, the clinic halted the food security project because it wasn't the primary focus of the clinic, and many of our patients obviously have comorbidities such as high blood pressure, diabetes that put them at a high risk, and then you have volunteers coming from doctors' offices and myself, a pharmacy, that have had high exposures, so it's just really not ideal at all. I will say though that we were at top capacity prior to the pandemic happening. We couldn't accept any more patients. And I know since the pandemic, lots of people have mentioned losing their health insurance. So even for the smallest ailments and sicknesses, they're unable to receive care, and that they need more access to that. And I definitely see that through my job. I'm actually a pharmacy technician with CVS Health. So I've heard a lot of stories of that happening.
My organization primarily serves college students. We work with college students to implement meal share programs and other programs like that on their campuses. And all of these food and housing insecurity related organizations have definitely been seeing an increase in people served right now, especially since a lot of campuses are closing down, dining hours are being reduced, and people are even being kicked off campus. So it's definitely greatly impacting college students, especially. But we're hopeful that colleges will decide to do the right thing and help their students out. So that's definitely really important.
I think that while it's been a time of great increased need, there's also a lot of generosity. Being on the team that works with fundraising and people who want to do philanthropy, there's a lot of people just reaching out a hand and asking how they can help, which has been so critical, especially because the pandemic really did affect our volunteer base as well. Some of the most stable weekly volunteers for nonprofits tend to be older retired folks who were at that at-risk population. So when more of them were staying home and corporate groups aren't going out to volunteer, then we depend more on individuals and families coming out to volunteer with us instead. So a couple of different unique challenges I think were affecting the food insecurity mix.
On that note, what's the importance of volunteers in the work that you do?
I can start off here. Like I said, we are a staff of 8. And so pretty much every single person has their own department that they run. And that could not be done without the help of volunteers. So on a normal day, we see anywhere from probably 20 to 30 volunteers in our location. And they are the front lines. I mean, they are there checking in the clients. They're helping them shop. They're walking around with them. They're stocking our shelves. My organization is a little bit unique. It is both a food pantry and a food bank. So we do direct service to clients, which means that the clients come into our location to shop. But we also do food recovery, which is picking up the waste from local grocery stores to put that to use, as well as distribute to other smaller pantries in the community. So we have at every aspect of our organization, there's volunteers. They are helping input our food donations into our database. They're checking people in. They are picking up from grocery stores. They are delivering to other pantries. I mean, they are doing absolutely all of it. And like Molly said, you know, majority of our volunteers are older. You know, when you operate on a typical 9 to 5, the people who are available to help during that are usually retired or students. And when KU's closed, you know, that wipes out that whole base. And then our retired volunteers were not able to be in for their own safety. So, you know, we saw a great rally from our local restaurants after they closed down, that a lot of restaurant workers came in and helped volunteer. But it was definitely, for the first few months there, like, staff had to drop everything that they were doing and, you know, put boxes in people's cars, pick up from grocery stores, be knee deep in food waste of getting it organized of what's good and what's not. And it was definitely a really trying time, but we have started to see that volunteer base come back, which is a big weight off of everyone's shoulders.
Our organization is literally entirely run by volunteers. All of our leadership team for the nonprofit is volunteer. It's 3 college students, and then we have a couple of volunteer interns, and we have 9 chapters currently, which each have about 5 or 10 students involved. So in total, we probably have about 50 volunteers running the entire operation, all of the work that we do. So volunteers are definitely incredibly important to our work. Especially because most volunteers are college students, and it's super important to incorporate college student voices into the work that we're doing, since all of our work impacts college students.
Piggybacking off of Paige, my clinic is entirely volunteer-based, and our community partner, which we get food from, is also entirely volunteer-based. Luckily, our clinic has more set volunteers who make this opportunity their job. Right now, me and another research colleague basically run our food pantry. However, our community partner is greatly affected by volunteers, as it can be corporate organizations like Molly mentioned, or elderly people looking for something to do during the day. And so with having at-risk communities, if our community partner doesn't have their volunteers, we obviously don't get the food we need for our patients.
So last year, our organization, volunteers helped provide over 140,000 hours of service. So a lot of stuff happens because of volunteers. The good majority of that, food sorting and packing, is just important to get food out the door, especially if it's sorting through produce. We need to get that done as quickly as possible so it gets to people while it's still fresh and really at its best quality. We were also doing a new service model where we were giving out boxes of food. So we needed to be pre-packing these boxes. There was definitely some challenges there. And it was something where we have to reach out to the community, and we were posting more and asking more from people we knew could help. So it was a challenge that we know other people saw as well. And we're hopeful that soon people will start to be able to come back. I mean, really one of the first things that this pandemic presented was, how do we all work safely and how do we keep our volunteers safe through that process? So it was really determining like the mask policy and temperature checks and things that would make people feel safe and secure in our facility.
Okay, so we've touched on it a little bit so far, but due to the pandemic, estimates show that as many as 54 million people in the United States will face food insecurity. So how can individuals watching and different chapters to help while remaining socially distant?
One of the biggest ways people can help, which will help create systemic change, is by writing letters to campus administration if you're a student, or your senators as well. Definitely try to figure out what the policies are in your campus or state, and figure out some solutions that other places have proposed, and figure out a way that you can present an argument for that to the people who are in charge of making those decisions. That's definitely one of the most simple, but also one of the most effective ways that you can make a difference.
I totally agree with Paige. For example, the University of Kansas, I'm a proud alum, but we were so far behind in times when it came to addressing food insecurity at the college level. I currently sit on a board of the Kansas City area universities, their food pantries, and our first meeting went around and talked about when all of the organizations started, and KU was last, and we are the biggest university. And that's just not okay. And then also, for example, over the summer, the campus cupboard is housed within the union, and they locked down the union, which meant that students weren't able to access the pantry, that were still on campus and were not able to go home. So luckily, with working with the university, and we were able to set up an outside distribution, but it's just, unfortunately, for a lot of your larger universities, it's not at the forefront of needs that need to be met. I will say that as of, I think, this upcoming year, there is a, at least for bigger universities, there's a survey that goes out to college chapters or college universities addressing different social things. And just this year, food insecurity was finally added as a question. So we will start to see some more like national statistics on it, because as of yet, it's pretty much just been universities having to do their own research on it. So I know I got a little off there, but it's been a heated topic over the last few months. I will say, I'm sure for Molly and I's organization, we do have those volunteer needs in place and ways to do it safely now. So we have a large warehouse. We have everything marked off of what is 6 feet apart, mask policy, temperature checks, all of that to keep our volunteer base safe and comfortable, because they are so important to our day-to-day operations. And so there are safe ways to volunteer, but it is still very understandable for people who are not wanting to go out and interact with a large population of people. And that is really when advocacy is so important.
Like everyone has mentioned, I highly encourage everybody to just start conversations and reach out. Lots of different organizations have different policies on how they want to manage COVID because it is so unknown. Food insecurity, but like I said, reach out. Food insecurity is not a topic that's really being discussed currently as a social determinant, even though literature and biostatistics shows us that it is a big determinant of health. My best advice would also just to be mindful of what you're doing, watch your health, make sure you're healthy, wear your mask, check your temperature, and if you're handling food, possibly wear gloves.
So if you're not able to volunteer in person, there's definitely still ways that you can help and get involved in the community. One of the things I work with in my role is peer-to-peer fundraising. So for example, at the food bank, every $1 that's donated helps provide $8 worth of groceries. So we've seen actually a large increase in Facebook fundraisers and people using our online fundraising platform to showcase their unique talents or sell masks or do a live concert on Facebook, charity streaming on Twitch. There's a lot of different options now to engage virtually, and more of them are catching up to add that donate button so that you can help impact an organization that you care about while you do it. So it's really spreading the word, and in that case, sharing it with people, because we know that there's a lot of power in our own community networks. So we just have to harness that.
That's awesome, ladies. So I'm gonna go ahead and move over to the questions that y'all are leaving in the comments. If anyone has anything that they would like to ask our lovely panelists, please leave it in the comments below and I will get to them. The first question is from Miss Jan Titsworth. Do any of you have suggestions about a type of experience that your sisters could try in order to develop more empathy for those who are food insecure? For instance, spending a week on a budget similar to a family that receives SNAP.
So yeah, I saw this question. I absolutely loved it, Jan. I definitely agree with your idea of trying to live on a budget that a Snout family might live on, or living on basic necessities. Last year, I volunteered in Honduras, and food insecurity is a huge problem there. So once returning to the States, me and my friends decided to try to live off their dietary, what they have, and just it was really challenging and really difficult. And I think it taught us a lot of empathy.
There was one resource I saw, and I don't remember the name of it, but there are simulators online that kind of simulate being like living on this budget for a month, for example. So it's not just the food choices, it's stacking up how all your other choices are influencing and impacting your health and quality of life and access to food as well. So, all right, you took public transit, you saved some money, so maybe now you can afford some pasta. So it was an interesting way to think further about the different bills and things that pop up in life. So there are some cool virtual tools. There's a lot of really smart developers out there. I'd encourage you to look there as well.
Yeah, I definitely think those are all really good ideas. It's also important to recognize the privilege that you have of being able to do it as a exercise as opposed to living it in your day-to-day life. So I would say definitely while you're doing it, recognize that as well. So it's definitely important to think about.
Yeah, I agree with Paige. When I was in AmeriCorps, I had to do a poverty simulator, and to be blunt, I felt so gross about it. I think that it can sometimes be a tool that's used with all good intentions, but leaves out the population that you're talking about, which, we're finding out more and more is not the way to handle these situations. So I think, empathy can't be taught. But if being able to put yourself in the mindset of, I have to live on $2 less or under $2 of serving for meals, I think that's a great way to introduce yourself to it. And then going forward, it's advocating for the people that are experiencing it in their everyday lives and volunteering and seeing it firsthand. Is really, I think, the best way to move that forward.
I think that there's definitely a lot of judgment that comes towards food insecurity, and people really feel that burden. I think there's some cool internal work that people can do when thinking about their own presumptions about who would be food insecure or what that person looks like or what car they drive up to the pantry. We know that people might have an iPhone because that's how they apply for jobs, or maybe that car was a gift to them and it's worth more to keep that car and have access to a job. There's just so many factors that we don't know. And so when we're able to do that work internally, I think that really helps our community so that we all come from a more empathetic place.
Yeah, I think removing that inherent bias is so important. We talk about that every day. There's a wonderful article about a woman who had to go to a food pantry driving her Mercedes and the looks that she got. And you never know someone's backstory. So that article talks about how she got divorced. The car was already fully paid. It made more sense to keep the car than to sell it and try and buy something cheaper. She lost her job. There's so many factors in life that approaching a situation and catching yourself when you think those things, because we all do it, of what could lead to this is so important, because that's the thing. You never know what brought someone to that situation, but you can do your best to meet them where they're at and help them that day.
Awesome. And so on that note, we did have a question in the comments from Esther of Valos that says, please describe how members can incorporate respect, dignity, and cultural awareness when planning, promoting, and performing community service in this area.
I think that one thing that would promote respect and just being in touch with your community is making sure that you're really working with local organizations who understand their communities. For example, at the food bank, we have over 900 feeding programs and partners like food pantries that work with us. And oftentimes it's those pantries that know their local community and their preferences and what types of food would be most appreciated there. And if we need more bilingual materials there or just any sort of resources. So I think being willing to understand the community before you jump headfirst into something means that they're not doing that like emotional legwork beforehand with you, that you're approaching it thoughtfully.
One thing that we see quite a bit is, groups of organizations will come in to volunteer, which is great. That's what we need. But then, start to take pictures or aren't necessarily very cognizant of what's going on in the background or what conversations they're having in front of other people who are using those services. So if, a chapter goes in to volunteer at a local food pantry or food bank, like having that discussion firsthand of being really, really cognizant of you're going into someone having to use a service that can be embarrassing and stigmatizing because, while we all want to reduce that and say that there's no need to be embarrassed of needing food service, that's just, we're not there yet in this world. And so being cognizant of if you need to take a picture of your organization, do it outside, check the background 3 times before you take it. Be aware of the conversations you're having. Look into maybe the demographics of the organization, see the type of people that they're serving. And then, if, for example, if you're going to serve at a homeless shelter, maybe some sort of training in how to talk to houseless folks and what sort of language to use, etc.
Just jumping onto what Jessica said about kind of keeping the neighbor at the center of that experience is that sometimes as a first-time volunteer, it's challenging when you find a neighbor who's combative or maybe isn't in a great mood when you're just trying to help. And sometimes it's hard to deal with that situation as a volunteer, but it is important to remember that this is reality for a lot of people. And it's not just a one-off thing for them like it might be when you visit an organization. So I think that compassion and empathy definitely comes in there.
Definitely. I love the mindfulness techniques that these ladies are encouraging. For my population being majority Hispanic and not speaking a lot of Spanish, I found it really important to always have a translator nearby so that I could just listen and be mindful of what I'm doing. Currently, we also provide recipes with each food bag, so finding things that fit within their dietary needs, fit within their health literacy level, and different things of that nature. My biggest advice to any volunteer is to listen before you respond. Listening can really impact how well you serve someone and can be impactful in their life as well.
So another question related to that was when collecting food for a community in need, how can we become cognizant and aware of their special dietary needs or religious and cultural diets? I think that comes to when donating food, maybe.
I feel like the best way to do this is to ask the organization that you're donating to what foods are taken most often. I know at least at NC State, a lot of times people will bring in canned vegetables and those sit in our back room until they expire and we have to throw them away because we're not allowed to give out expired food. So I definitely think asking those organizations specifically that'll be the best resource.
Yeah, our organization keeps that online, so it's easy to find on our website. And there's resources as well that kind of keep some of that in mind more generally. No glass jars. Glass is not great when you're collecting a bunch of food. Fun tip.
I definitely agree with all of these things. Being in a clinic setting, we obviously know the patient's dietary allergies, so we're able to customize their food bags as needed. For me, in my situation, I'm celiac, so if someone was to give me bread, it would actually be more unhelpful than it is helpful. When donating, I would just honestly reach out to your volunteer organizer and see what all they need and what works best for their community.
Something that's really great when doing food drives as well is combining it and doing a food and fund drive. You can really do that effectively to collect food with people that are local, but then you can also turn it into a fundraiser. That way people can participate no matter where they're located, and you can really spread that impact.
I totally agree with all of this. I think going back to just the mindfulness of it is donate things that you would want to eat. Like I think a lot of the times we see people clearing out their cabinets of, stuff that's been sitting for a long time, which luckily, per USDA guidelines, we are able to give out expired food. So just because something has an expiration date on it doesn't mean that it's bad. Canned goods, luckily, they stay good for longer. But at the same time, I think there's often a mindset of it's free, people should just want to eat anything. And that's so wrong and such a bad way to think because, food is meant to be enjoyed. And really, like, everyone has different dietary restrictions, preferences, all of that. But donating quality items is a great place to start.
Yeah, I definitely echo what Jessica said about keeping in mind that it's not about policing other people's food choices. It's important to give that autonomy to our neighbors. Sometimes I think people are surprised when you might see desserts at a food pantry or cakes that were donated from the store. And if you think about it, people still have birthdays and people still want a guilty pleasure dessert after dinner sometimes. And being able to make sure that people have food that they want and that they can access that easily, that's really what we're all about.
Awesome. So how could fight against food insecurity impact the medical industry, especially in the midst of this pandemic?
Well, I really love this question as I am a public health candidate. I think that's very loaded. I think it could be good and bad. Obviously, we have to be very careful when volunteering in the pandemic, especially with food, because food can obviously help contract and harbor viruses. However, food insecurity is a huge social determinant on health. I am advocating for this in my cohort. And I think it could be really good. Being in pharmaceuticals, I see a lot of conditions that could be managed with food and dietary change.
Yeah, to echo what Kaitlyn said, just this last year, or I guess it would have been 2019, we started a partnership with our local hospital. So pre-pandemic, the hospital would come in once a month and offer free health screenings for our clients. Because a lot of folks don't have health insurance and going to get just basic blood work is a huge hurdle for some folks. So being able to test their blood glucose, their cholesterol, getting those screenings and then being able to connect them with resources. And then we also offer, we call them the emergency bags, but we at the food bank bag up. It's about 2 days worth of caloric intake. Specifically, it's very high protein, low sodium, and they are housed in the emergency room. So there's been a lot of talk in healthcare communities of screening for food insecurity, and that is such a recent addition to the conversation. But we did get the local hospital that they are now screening for food insecurity. So if someone is in need, they are given a bag of food that can hold them for approximately 2 days, and then a whole list of resources to, connect both ways. We knew that the hospital needed to be in the food bank, and we knew that the food bank needed to be in the hospital.
Yeah, so just like Jessica said, my food bank also, we have a program in the last couple of years where we're partnering with hospital systems, and we have a screen and intervene program where you're helping doctors learn how to screen for food insecurity. Because obviously our doctors learn a lot about us and they know that food is really important when it comes to our health. So we've been able to do that, and they can help identify people who might be food insecure. And for our program, we typically, I think it's involved with like our fresh produce program. It's kind of like a several week thing where they'll have access to it either on site at a hospital or nearby, just depending on the hospital's ability to handle that program. But it's great that more and more medical professionals, I think, are really tuning into that as an issue because they learn a lot. And as when people who are connected to the community know about these resources, they can help people find these resources. So really, no matter what career you go into, whenever you know about these community resources, you can help somebody if that situation comes up.
I will add, being in public health, I'm constantly looking at why patients are not adherent. Since I do go to a medical college, there is a hospital on my campus, and they have what is called a food pharmacy. Every patient that comes in through the ER or the hospital is screened for food insecurity. It's in their EHR. It's required as part of the chart. Once they're identified as food insecure, they're sent to what they call the food pharmacy, where they can shop within their dietary needs. So obviously a chemo patient will eat very differently than a diabetic patient would. The food pharmacist, yes, that is a word. She helps them identify what food is best for them, how they can continue to live this healthy lifestyle out. And then they are also offered different management classes. So diabetes management, cholesterol management are huge classes for them. And then once they are adherent to those classes, they can come back to the food pharmacy and get more food.
I will just add that the historic systemic portion of health and food is so important when it comes to this topic, because we know that food-related illnesses majorly affect minority and low-income populations, and there's a reason that is. And it's because of years and years and years of mistreatment of our food system. And so while all this stuff is incredible and we're at the ground right now, and there's so much that still needs to be done when it comes to this, and acknowledging our history of why things are the way that they are is really imperative.
Hey, Caitlin, somebody is asking if the food pharmacy is the one at Meharry.
Yes, I was going to try to comment on Facebook, but yes, Alyssa, it is at NGH at Meharry.
Okay, so another question from our sister, Kristy Simon. So she wants to know, how can students encourage universities to take action on food insecurity on their own campuses?
The first step is definitely getting someone to get data on how many students are experiencing food insecurity on your campus. So if there's a professor that's interested in this that might be tenured and could take it on as one of their projects, or even if students are just doing it individually, that's definitely the first step to get them to see that there is a problem. And then once you've established that, figuring out what gaps there are on your campus, like is there a food pantry, is there a meal share program? And once you find out what the gaps are, try to come up with some sort of proposal for how these can be filled. Is it something you can do on your own as like a chapter of another organization? Or is it something that you need more support at the university level to accomplish? And if you do need more support, find allies, either faculty and staff or other students, to try to build a strong coalition to come together and figuring out a plan, whether that's talking to the administration directly or going through different avenues for that.
All right, and so Miss Maddie Kemp, do you have any recommendations on resources where we can learn more on food insecurity or keep up with developing issues?
Feeding America is the national organization of food banks, and they have a lot of really great developed advocacy resources. So I would go to feedingamerica.org to find out more. Um, your local food banks or organizations might have something on their site, but Feeding America is probably the best bet for compiling that. And I believe there's like a email list you can actually join, and they'll notify me when there's something that, oh, you should write your representative about, and here's an email template you can use. So lots of resources there.
I totally agree with Molly. The other one that I use a lot is Civil Eats, which is a national newspaper. They do a lot of beyond food insecurity. They do food justice, racial justice, land management. They talk about the Farm Bill. It's really a comprehensive resource of what envelops the food system, because it is top down. You know, it's the National Farm Bill. It's everything goes into how your community is affected. So getting, like, I think looking at Feeding America for your community's statistics, and then looking into that of further of why it became that way. And Civil Eats is personally, my favorite for those resources.
Just to piggyback off of everyone, when writing our preliminary abstract and purpose for the research, we used a lot of the Feeding America data, proving that we did need this help and we did need food for our patients. To best learn about it in your communities, I would reach out to the organizations. Every time I've ever volunteered, there have been people who would love to share with me what is going on in our community and how we can be better.
And if you specifically want to know upcoming research on campus issues, you can look at the Hope Center. That's a really good resource for all the new research on that.
Okay, so what are some factors that create food deserts in communities? How can our members challenge these barriers where they live? And what resources can we work to provide to the community at large to help change this status quo?
I think food deserts is kind of a tricky term, because even having a Dollar General is included as a grocery store. And so food desert is the worst of the worst because they don't even have a Dollar General, but there are so many other areas that don't have a full service grocery store. So advocating for like farmers market pop-ups, seeing if there's some local farms that can pop up produce stands, has been really popular in Lawrence over the last few years. And then like it's all housing. So where low income communities are being pushed by other factors. And that goes so deep into so many other issues that's really your local representatives of advocating for low income housing in the quote unquote good neighborhoods. And then also advocating for full service grocery stores in those communities.
So one of the things that we do at our food bank is we have a thing called mobile pantries, where we are able to take trucks out and pop up pantries in those locations where there's not as many grocery stores or not as much access to food pantries as the community needs. So something that could be an interesting chapter project for somebody is that we offer sponsorship opportunities for mobile pantries, and other organizations do similar concepts. So you can look into how much it costs to sponsor one of those distributions, and you can help get food out to that area. Could be a cool way to get your chapter involved. And typically there's also a volunteer component you can do if your chapter is volunteering or will be in the future.
I definitely agree with everything that's been said. In public health, we're noticing that these determinants are from several causes. Most of them are systemic. However, my best advice would be to improve the literacy in your area. The other day, we had a discussion how jails are built around fourth grade literacy levels. So once we improve literacy, we can fight things such as poverty. Also, I think conversations about things that are considered uncomfortable, such as racism and other systematic issues from our government, would be good conversations to have with your sisterhood.
Right. And then we have one last question from the comments. I work in transportation, and one of our customers is a food bank on the east coast of Florida, and they told us the other day that they can't give away their food fast enough anymore because donations are piling in, yet their community has not been lining up as much as Florida has been opening up more after the initial COVID shutdown. Any suggestions?
Well, I mean, it's definitely good that there's not a lot of people looking for food in that area. But I guess what I would say is try to ask for monetary donations instead so you can use them when you do need them later on.
So we know that there's a lot of food coming in, especially from federal programs as well. So suddenly there's an influx in a lot of food banks, inventory, and warehouse. I think that there's definitely a scarcity mindset when it comes to just really anybody who could benefit from a food bank or a food pantry, is that, well, I don't really need it compared to another person. And so people don't always want to take as much, or maybe they don't go in the first place because of that. So really, we try to make sure that it's clear that we have food and we've got a lot of it. We've really started to be more aggressive on our social media channels to really send messages directly to our neighbors that are being served. So we let them know where we're going to be going with our next pop-up market, and we make posts on the day that it's happening and letting them know we've got enough food for 1,000 people. Please show up. There's no wait right now. So we've tried some new marketing tactics on social media because most people nowadays have a smartphone. It doesn't really matter your income level. Most people have access to technology now. It's pretty basic. So meeting people where we're at to get the word out has really helped to make sure that people are aware of what we're doing.
Yeah, to echo what Molly said, there are so many federal programs that have popped up since this to help with COVID relief. A lot of food banks have been overwhelmed with the amount of food that they're getting, which is not a bad thing. But at the same time, there is still a large population of people who don't want to be leaving their homes and are, scared to leave or go into public places. So while the need is probably there are so many factors of, needing services for the first time, access, all of that. So it's a good problem to have of being overwhelmed with food. And I hope that they're composting or giving to their local farms to put in the food system to feed to animals, because that's kind of the best way to deal with excess food waste is get it in the ground.
Definitely. I agree with all of these things, but most especially what Molly has said about starting maybe mobile clinics and sending out food to areas that might have low transportation. Anytime we're looking at a project, transportation is always considered, and something we're seeing with people who are in need is that they don't have a good amount of transportation. Maybe the buses are not running when they need them to be, or different things. So either offering to drop the food off at the person's home or offering to give rides to the person to get them to the pantry.
Yeah, with our pop-up markets, that was something, it's different than our mobile pantries because it came directly out of COVID. We suddenly had a lot of food. We needed to do that drive-through model. All right, we're just going to pop this up and we're going to serve as many people as we can. An important thing with some of those pop-ups is partnering with other community organizations. It's really important that nonprofits are collaborating, and sometimes depending on the community, that can be tough to achieve. So when we're able to partner with communities, they can spread the word effectively if we're partnering with the local pantry that can push it out to all the people they serve. If we partner with the school district who can push it out to all the parents in their network. So there's a lot of ways that you can be creative and serve more people when you join forces, which is great.
Okay, so we're going to take this last question, but many members, active and alum, experienced or are experiencing now food insecurity due to shortages at their local grocery stores. How can we help the members of our organization when we see these impacting our own membership?
It was a really scary time at the beginning of this, seeing store shelves empty. I think a lot of places have kind of figured out that as of now of, keeping grocery stores well stocked. Something to be mindful of is WIC products. So often WIC is women, infant, child. It is for pregnant and new mothers and kids under the age of 5. And that program, at least in the state of Kansas, but I believe nationally, there's only certain food items at grocery stores that can buy with WIC, and it's can be the difference in brand even sometimes. And so it's often a sticker that's next to the price. And if there's black beans that one brand is WIC and one brand is not WIC, maybe purchase the non-WIC brand to leave that for people to use that resource. Other than that, I think connecting with organizations that do, food banks, food pantries, when you can't find something at the grocery store, we encourage people to come to Just Food First, see the items that they can get from us, and then be able to fill out at the grocery store with the other things that they need. Because while we can't be someone's sole source of food, we can be a great basis of getting basic items and being able to build out from there.
Another thing that I think could be a really good idea within the organization would be to create some sort of emergency fund that people could apply to, could be contributed to by active or alumni members, and then have people apply to it that could be used for like food or something like that.
Something that Jessica said, kind of, sorry, we all just have so many great ideas. There are great questions happening here. So something Jessica said kind of just reminded me that when we were, a lot of us going to stockpile or trying to make sure that we had enough food at our own homes, a lot of families that are facing food insecurity don't have the luxury of making their own stockpile. So when people are panic buying, that means that when somebody goes for their grocery trip, once they've gotten paid, maybe suddenly everything's out, or the things that they can purchase with SNAP or WIC, they can't get right now. So trying to be mindful of that. I think just in the future, we all learned a lot from the pandemic, how this all started. I think a lot more people are hopefully going to be more prepared or understand those panic buying impulses. So that's just something personally we can all do. I think if someone is in need of help, just connecting to local resources. So to find a local resource, a great way to do that is the Feeding America Network, feedingamerica.org. From there, you can find your local food bank. And typically from there, the food bank, you can search by your zip code or see their list of local pantries to see who's nearest to you and when they're open and if they've got a website. Really, that's the easiest place to send people to find help quickly in their area.
Something I would suggest is chapters being aware with the social services that are on their campus. I'm not sure if many of my sisters in the Epsilon chapter are aware that our university had a food pantry is still active and going through COVID, which has been really, really helpful. I think this would also be good because you can mention counseling services, which might be necessary when battling food insecurity. While I do encourage social distancing all day and every day, I think meal sharing could be good. Maybe you could leave the food out on the porch and not have that exchange and do a Zoom call. This might also be a great way to know your sisters and to be with them during this time.
Something to be mindful as a sisterhood, I guess, is when you're asking people to contribute, just keeping in mind that not everybody's at the same point. So even if it's asking to bring a dish to an event, that can impose a challenge on some people. So trying where we can to alleviate that burden so that people don't feel a stigma or ashamed or anything. I think that's where we can all do better as sisters to try to make sure that people feel comfortable and accepted for where they're at.
Yeah, another thing similar to that is having events at restaurants or other places that cause money. That can definitely create a barrier for sisters who don't have the ability to go to those places all the time and can make them feel left out if everyone else is able to go to this place, but they can't.
Okay, so thank you, ladies, so much. What is one final message you'd like to give to the audience about your role, your passion for reducing hunger, or how to get involved?
I'm really big about manifesting what I want right now, currently in my life. For me, finding volunteer opportunities has sometimes been difficult, especially with food insecurity, but I know it's a problem in my community. If you have to, start it yourself. You might start something great.
I think that hunger in our communities, it's been around and it will be around. It's an issue that so many people can connect to in different ways. And it's really great when people are able to connect with their local resources, to take the time to learn a little bit more about the issue, and then to just do your part in spreading the word about that issue so that other people care and other people donate to support these causes doing critical work for our communities. So just taking that time to put in the extra effort. I mean, we're all in OPA, so we're all concerned about our communities and we all want to do that work. So I think that's a great place to start. And I'm really proud of my connection with Omega Phi Alpha, which I think really fostered that sense of community service and led me to working in the nonprofit sector.
I would say the biggest piece of advice that I have is to never take no for an answer. There will always be people when you're trying to create change who won't want to see the change happen or don't think it's necessary. But it's really important to know and to believe in what you're doing and know that it's important.
My last comment, I'm such a big proponent of thinking of the food system as a whole, and not just, food insecurity necessarily, but what in your community is causing that. I personally am probably a little bit of environmental nerd, but I think the Farm Bill is so interesting, and connecting with, where your food comes from, because thinking of how the apple got to your plate is so interesting, because it's where it's grown, it's how it's got there, who bought it, where that money come from. It's such a holistic approach, and I think unfortunately a lot of Americans are really disconnected from their food, and I think the first step to that is volunteering, advocating, reading, educating yourself. There's so much to be learned and there's so much to do, and it's really exciting. But yeah, I think that's it.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much. If you would like to get in contact with any of our panelists, please let us know and we can connect you. But that being said, I think we're about out of time. Thank you, ladies, so much for participating and sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thank you guys. We obviously have a lot of really awesome, talented sisters, so it's really great to be able to connect with you guys virtually.
Yeah, I'm really excited to start off this panel and keep it going, hopefully. And yeah, we're good. Thank you.